In the grand scheme of galactic food chains, the Vexkari sat comfortably at the very top. 8 feet of muscle, claws, and attitude, wrapped in midnight black fur that could camouflage with shadows themselves. They were the kind of predators that other predators had nightmares about. The kind that made entire species check under their beds before going to sleep. The kind that charged premium rates for hunting expeditions, because let's face it, when you're that good at killing things, you don't work for free. Grimfang crouched on the ridge overlooking the crash site, his yellow eyes gleaming with what could only be described as professional satisfaction. As pack leader of the most feared hunting group in 3-star systems, he'd seen plenty of prey in his time. Desperate Zephyrians trying to bargain with their lives, terrified Quellan diplomats offering huge sums of credits, even a few cocky Martian colonists who thought their fancy weapons would save them. But a human. Now that was interesting. Humans had this reputation, see? Not for being particularly dangerous or anything sensible like that. No, humans were famous for being spectacularly unpredictable, the kind of species that would either surrender immediately or do something so completely insane that it defied all tactical analysis. Target is establishing what appears to be a temporary shelter, reported Razorclaw, the pack's tracker. His voice carried that clinical tone that all good hunters developed when describing prey. Single male, appears to be unarmed, showing no signs of distress despite obvious awareness of his situation. Grimfang's ears twitched with amusement. No signs of distress? Really? His ship just turned into a very expensive crater, and he's stuck on a planet with no rescue beacon. Either this human is remarkably calm under pressure, or remarkably stupid. Down in the clearing, the human in question was doing something that definitely leaned toward the stupid category. Jake Martinez, though the hunting pack didn't know his name yet, was trying to start a fire using the ancient human technique of rubbing 2 sticks together. This might have been impressive if he wasn't doing it about 3 feet away from his ship's still functional emergency flare kit. He's either a survival expert or completely clueless, muttered Bloodmaw, the pack's muscle. I can't tell which. Does it matter? Nightstrike, their strategist, was already calculating attack angles. Dangerous or pathetic, prey is prey. We haven't eaten properly in 6 days. That was the uncomfortable truth none of them wanted to acknowledge. The great Vexkari hunting pack, terror of the Outer Rim, was basically down to their last energy bars. The hunting preserve business had been rough lately. Fewer wealthy clients wanting to pay for the authentic predator experience. Something about insurance liability and unnecessary risk to civilian populations, as if getting eaten by apex predators wasn't clearly outlined in the waiver. But this human, this was different. This was opportunity landing literally in their backyard. Jake finally got his pathetic little fire started and sat back, with the kind of satisfaction that suggested he'd just solved interstellar travel. He pulled out what looked like a primitive food preparation kit and started humming something that might have been music, if you were being generous. Grimfang's stomach chose that exact moment to growl loud enough that a small bird fell out of a nearby tree. Right then, he said, trying to maintain some dignity. Tonight we feast. What followed was a masterclass in predatory coordination. At least, it would have been if anyone had been paying attention. The Vexkari hunting pack moved with the fluid precision of a perfectly tuned machine, each member falling into their specialized role with practiced ease. Razorclaw began the traditional stalking dance, circling the perimeter to establish scent markers and identify escape routes. His massive paws made absolutely no sound as he moved through the underbrush, a feat of stealth that had taken decades to master. He was, quite literally, death on 4 legs. Silent, invisible, inevitable. The human threw a stick into his fire and missed. It landed about 2 feet to the left and immediately started a small grass fire that he had to stomp out while making noises that sounded distinctly like cursing. Professional assessment? Grimfang whispered into his comm unit. Either this is the most elaborate psychological warfare I've ever witnessed, Razorclaw replied, or our target has the survival instincts of a concussed lemming. Meanwhile, Bloodmaw was positioning himself for the charge. 800 pounds of pure muscle and aggression. He was what happened when evolution decided that subtlety was overrated. His role was simple. Be big, be scary, and make sure nothing remained standing when the dust settled. He'd never met a problem that couldn't be solved by running directly at it while roaring loudly. Jake had moved on to trying to fix his communicator by banging it against a rock. This was apparently the extent of human technical expertise. I'm getting mixed signals here, boss, Bloodmaw reported. He's either setting up some kind of trap, or he genuinely thinks percussive maintenance is a valid repair technique. Nightstrike, true to her name and nature, was analyzing the situation from multiple angles. Where other predators saw prey, she saw patterns, weaknesses, the exact sequence of moves that would turn a hunt into an execution. Her mind was a tactical computer wrapped in claws and attitude. Movement patterns suggest no combat training, she observed clinically. Posture indicates complete lack of situational awareness. Heart rate appears normal, which is actually kind of disturbing. Either he's got nerves of steel or no functioning brainstem. Jake had given up on the communicator and was now rummaging through what appeared to be an emergency kit. He pulled out various items, examined them with the sort of confusion usually reserved for advanced mathematics, and occasionally made little disappointed noises. He's going through his supplies, Razorclaw noted. Standard survival protocol would suggest rationing, but he's handling everything like he's never seen emergency equipment before. Maybe he's not a trained explorer, Grimfang mused. Could be a civilian transport passenger. That would explain the complete lack of survival competence. Or, Bloodmaw suggested hopefully, he's just really, really stupid. I'm good with stupid prey. Stupid prey doesn't require complex planning. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the clearing. This was traditionally when the Vexgari revealed themselves. The moment when their prey realized that the hunting preserve wasn't just a scenic wilderness, but an elaborate death trap, designed for the entertainment of the galaxy's most discerning predators. Jake pulled something out of his pack that made all 4 hunters freeze in place. Food. Real, actual food. Not survival rations or emergency protein paste, but what appeared to be an honest-to-goodness prepared meal. The smell hit them like a freight train. Imfang's stomach didn't just growl this time. It practically roared, a full orchestral arrangement of desperate hunger. Change of plans, he whispered to his pack, trying to ignore the way his mouth was watering. We wait and see what he does with that food. For tactical reasons. Definitely not because we're all starving. This is purely strategic patience. Sure it was. The moment had arrived. After 30 minutes of what Grimfang would later describe as tactical food observation, the pack was ready to make their dramatic entrance. This was the part that usually went one of 2 ways: complete terror followed by begging, or complete terror followed by a very brief and unsuccessful attempt at resistance. Grimfang stepped into the firelight first, because pack leaders always led from the front. It was in the job description, right after "look intimidating" and "distribute prey fairly among subordinates." His massive form cast a shadow that seemed to swallow half the clearing, yellow eyes glowing like twin suns in the darkness. The effect was, objectively speaking, terrifying. Jake looked up from his meal and blinked. Oh, thank God, I was hoping you guys were the rescue team. There was a moment of silence so profound that you could hear individual molecules bumping into each other. I'm sorry, Grimfang said, his carefully rehearsed intimidation speech dying somewhere between his brain and his vocal cords. What? The rescue team, Jake repeated, as if this explained everything. My ship's beacon went out when I crashed, and I've been sitting here for 3 hours wondering if anyone got my distress signal. Are you with Galactic Recovery Services? Because I have to tell you, your customer service response time is incredible, but your uniforms are a little intense. Razorclaw emerged from the shadows, claws extended in classic predator fashion. Jake's face lit up like he'd just won the cosmic lottery. Oh, wow, there's more of you. This is great. I was getting worried I'd have to spend the night out here. Not that it's not nice, he added quickly, gesturing around the clearing. Very scenic, great ambiance. But I've got a conference call tomorrow morning that I really can't miss. Bloodmaw materialized from the opposite side of the clearing, his arrival accompanied by the kind of low, menacing growl that had reduced grown warriors to tears. Excellent, Jake said, apparently interpreting this as some sort of greeting. The whole crew's here. Listen, I hope you don't mind, but I was just having dinner. Emergency rations, you know how it is. Actually, do you guys want some? I've got plenty. He held up what appeared to be a sandwich. A simple, unremarkable sandwich that somehow smelled better than anything the hunting pack had encountered in their collective lifetimes. Nightstrike, who prided herself on being able to analyze any situation, found her tactical computer completely blue-screening. Is he, she whispered into the comm, offering us food? I think so, Grimfang whispered back, maintaining his intimidating pose while wrestling with the sudden realization that his stomach was staging a full-scale rebellion against his professional dignity. Look, Jake continued, apparently taking their stunned silence as polite consideration. I know you probably have protocol about accepting food from civilians or whatever, but it's really no trouble. I packed way too much for one person anyway. My mom always said I should share, and honestly, you guys look like you could use a good meal. That last comment hit a little too close to home. The pack exchanged glances that somehow managed to convey both wounded pride and desperate hunger. Grimfang cleared his throat, trying to salvage some semblance of authority. Human, he began, letting his voice drop to the register that usually made prey soil themselves. You appear to be under a significant misunderstanding about your current situation. Am I? Jake asked, looking genuinely concerned. Oh no, don't tell me you're private contractors. Please tell me Galactic Recovery didn't outsource rescue operations again. Their last outsourcing decision gave me food poisoning for a week. We are not, Grimfang said slowly, a rescue team. Oh, Jake processed this information. Okay, so you're... What exactly? Local authorities? Wildlife management? Some kind of welcome committee? We, Grimfang announced with as much dramatic flair as he could manage while his stomach was actively trying to crawl out of his body toward that sandwich, are the apex predators of this world. We are death incarnate. We are your worst nightmare made flesh. We are... Hungry, Jake suggested helpfully. The word hung in the air like an accusation. A very accurate accusation. Because seriously, Jake continued, you all look like you haven't eaten in days. That one over there, he pointed at Bloodmaw, is literally drooling. And you, he gestured at Grimfang, your stomach has been growling so loud I thought there was a small earthquake. Grimfang's dignity made one last valiant stand. We do not accept charity from prey. Prey? Jake looked around the clearing as if expecting to see some other creature. What prey? It's just us here. Unless you're talking about that weird bird that keeps making noise in the trees. But honestly, it sounds more annoying than edible. He held out the sandwich again. Peanut butter and jelly. Earth classic. You really should try some before we figure out the whole rescue situation. And that was how the most feared hunting pack in 3-star systems found themselves staring at a peanut butter and jelly sandwich like it held the secrets of the universe. What happened next would go down in Vexkari history as either the most shameful moment in their species' proud hunting tradition, or the best meal any of them had ever experienced. Possibly both. Grimfang made one last attempt to maintain his dignity. We are apex predators, he declared, his voice carrying all the authority he could muster. We do not share meals with our intended victims. Jake looked genuinely puzzled. Intended victims? Okay, I'm really confused now. Are you guys method actors or something? Because the whole predator thing is very convincing, but the timing seems weird. I mean, if you're filming some kind of nature documentary, shouldn't there be cameras? He glanced around the clearing as if expecting to spot film equipment. Also, shouldn't someone have mentioned this when I filed my flight plan? I'm pretty sure there are regulations about using crash sites for entertainment purposes. Razorclaw's stomach chose that moment to emit a sound that could only be described as the dying wail of a forgotten god. Every eye in the clearing turned to him. Tactical assessment, he announced with as much dignity as he could manage, suggests that understanding local customs requires direct cultural exchange. Are you seriously trying to rationalize accepting food from prey? Nightstrike hissed. I'm conducting reconnaissance, Razorclaw shot back. How can we effectively hunt a species if we don't understand their social behaviors? Jake, meanwhile, had opened his emergency kit and was pulling out additional items. You know what? This is perfect timing. I haven't had anyone to eat with in months. Space travel gets pretty lonely. Do you guys like chips? I've got these jalapeno-flavored ones that are amazing. He held up a bag that crackled invitingly. The sound hit the predator's enhanced hearing like auditory crack. What howled Bloodmaw asked weakly, are chips? Oh man, you're in for a treat. They're basically crunchy happiness in edible form. Here, try some. Jake poured a handful into his palm and offered them to the massive predator. Bloodmaw stared at the orange-dusted triangular objects with the intensity usually reserved for analyzing tactical weaknesses. Very slowly, he extended one claw and delicately picked up a single chip. The crunch was audible throughout the clearing. Bloodmaw's eyes widened to approximately the size of dinner plates. This, he announced with the solemnity of a religious revelation, is the greatest thing that has ever existed in the history of existence. Right? Jake grinned. Wait until you try them with the sandwich. The combination is incredible. Nightstrike, who prided herself on logical analysis, found herself facing a tactical dilemma of unprecedented complexity. On one hand, accepting food from prey violated approximately 17 different predatory protocols. On the other hand, her packmate had just achieved what appeared to be transcendental enlightenment through the consumption of processed corn products. Hypothetically, she said carefully, if one were to sample local food sources for intelligence-gathering purposes, what other options might be available? Jake's face lit up like he'd just been asked about his favorite hobby. Oh, I've got tons of stuff, let me see. He rummaged through his pack with the enthusiasm of someone who hadn't had company in way too long. Thermos of coffee that's still hot thanks to military-grade insulation, some of those dried fruit strips that taste way better than they have any right to, trail mix with chocolate pieces, which is basically nature's perfect food. He paused and looked at them seriously. Although I should probably ask about dietary restrictions first. Are you guys carnivores? Omnivores? Allergic to anything? I'd feel terrible if I accidentally poisoned my first alien friends. Alien friends, Grimfang repeated, his brain struggling to process this casual classification. Well, yeah, I mean, you're clearly not human, and you seem friendly enough. A little intense with the whole predator role-play thing, but everyone has their hobbies. I once knew a guy who collected vintage tax forms, so really, who am I to judge? Razorclaw had moved closer to the food spread and was examining everything with the focused intensity of a scientist studying a new species. The coffee, he said slowly. What is the purpose of this heated liquid? Oh, it's a stimulant, keeps you alert, helps you think clearly, essential for any kind of work, really. Here, try some. Jake poured a cup from his thermos and offered it to the tracker. The aroma that rose from the cup was unlike anything in the Vexicari olfactory experience. Rich, complex, with undertones that spoke of distant worlds and sophisticated preparation techniques. Razorclaw took a cautious sip, his pupils dilated. This beverage, he announced with the gravity of someone delivering a prophetic vision, contains the essence of productivity itself. That's the caffeine talking, Jake said cheerfully. Wait about 10 minutes and you'll understand why humans conquered half the galaxy running on coffee and spite. By this point, Grimfang was facing a complete breakdown of pack hierarchy. His subordinates were consuming alien food products and apparently achieving states of enlightenment that their species had spent millennia seeking through meditation and ritual combat. Perhaps, he said, his voice strained with the effort of maintaining leadership while his stomach was actively trying to stage a coup, a small tactical sampling would be appropriate. For intelligence purposes only, you understand. Absolutely, Jake agreed readily. Intelligence gathering is super important. Here, try the sandwich first. It's a good baseline for human food experiences. He handed over half of his peanut butter and jelly sandwich with the casual generosity of someone who had no idea he was feeding apex predators. Grimfang accepted the offering with the solemnity of a religious ceremony. The first bite was a revelation. Sweet, salty, with a texture that was somehow both familiar and completely alien. It was, he realized with growing horror, delicious. The combination of proteins and simple carbohydrates, he announced, desperately trying to maintain some scholarly distance from the experience, creates an efficient energy delivery system. Plus it tastes awesome, Jake added helpfully. That's the peanut butter. It's made from ground nuts mixed with oils and a little sugar. The jelly is fruit preserves. Basic stuff, but sometimes basic is perfect. Nightstrike had been quietly sampling the trail mix and was now staring at a chocolate chip with the expression of someone whose entire worldview had just been fundamentally challenged. This sweet component, she said carefully. It produces a neurochemical response that could be classified as pleasurable. That's chocolate, Jake explained. Technically, it's a mild stimulant, but mostly it just makes everything better. Humans have been basically obsessed with it for thousands of years. I can see why, Nightstrike admitted, then immediately looked mortified at her own honesty. The next 20 minutes were a masterclass in cultural exchange, if cultural exchange involved apex predators discovering junk food while trying to maintain their dignity. Bloodmaw became emotionally attached to the concept of potato chips. Razorclaw developed what could only be described as a coffee addiction in real time. Nightstrike conducted a systematic analysis of every item in Jake's food supply with the thoroughness of a research scientist. And Grimfang found himself in the deeply uncomfortable position of having the best meal of his life, while sitting around a campfire with someone he was supposed to be eating. So, Jake said conversationally, settling back with his own cup of coffee, what do you guys actually do for work? Besides the whole intimidating predator thing, I mean. Are you park rangers, wildlife biologists, security consultants? The question hung in the air like a challenge, forcing the pack to confront the fundamental absurdity of their situation. They were professional hunters, but they couldn't exactly explain that they killed people for money to someone who had just fed them the best meal of their lives. "We," Grimfang said slowly, "are in the population management business." "Oh, cool," Jake said, apparently taking this at face value. "That sounds important. Keeping ecosystems balanced and all that. Must be tough work, especially if you're having budget issues." "Budget issues?" Razorclaw asked, nearly choking on his coffee. "Well, you guys obviously haven't been eating well," Jake observed with the casual directness that humans were notorious for. "And your equipment looks pretty worn. Plus, you're all kind of skinny for your build type. I'm guessing funding for conservation work isn't what it used to be." The accuracy of this assessment was so devastating that none of them could think of an appropriate response. Jake, interpreting their silence as confirmation, nodded sympathetically. "Yeah, it's tough, all over. Budget cuts, administrative overhead, politicians who don't understand the importance of environmental work. I bet you guys are doing essential work and getting paid basically nothing for it." And just like that, the most feared hunting pack in 3-star systems found themselves being pitied by their intended prey for their poor working conditions. The silence that followed Jake's observation was the kind of silence that occurs when someone accidentally steps on a conversational landmine, and everyone is still figuring out how much damage has been done. Grimfang stared into his coffee cup, as if it might contain answers to questions he wasn't sure he wanted to ask. "You know," Jake continued, apparently oblivious to the existential crisis he'd just triggered, "I used to work in corporate consulting before I switched to xenobiology research. Saw a lot of organizations struggling with the same issues. Good people trying to do important work with inadequate resources and zero support from management." He gestured around the clearing with his sandwich. "Take this whole situation, for example. You guys are clearly professionals. I can tell by the way you move, the coordination, the attention to detail. But you're stuck on this backwater planet doing what I'm guessing is pretty thankless work, probably haven't seen a decent paycheck in months, and your supervisors are probably breathing down your necks about performance metrics that don't reflect the actual challenges you're facing." Bloodmaw made a choking sound that might have been laughter or despair. "How did you—" he started, then stopped, apparently unable to finish the question. "How did I know?" Jake shrugged. "Pattern recognition. It's kind of my thing. Plus, you guys have that look. I've seen it before in research teams that are passionate about their work, but getting screwed over by bureaucracy." Razorclaw, who was now on his 3rd cup of coffee and vibrating slightly, leaned forward. "What if," he said carefully, "hypothetically speaking, the work involved less traditional conservation methods?" "You mean like culling?" Jake asked matter-of-factly. "Yeah, I figured that might be part of it. Population management sometimes requires tough decisions. I'm guessing you guys are the ones who have to make the hard calls when the ecosystem gets out of balance." Nightstrike nearly dropped her trail mix. "You're okay with that?" "Look, I'm a xenobiologist. I understand ecosystem dynamics. Sometimes you have to remove individuals for the health of the whole system. It's not pleasant, but it's necessary work. The people who can do it without losing their humanity, or whatever the equivalent is for your species, are rare and valuable." Jake paused, studying their faces with the kind of attention usually reserved for microscope slides. "Although, judging by your current situation, I'm guessing the system isn't exactly working the way it's supposed to." "The system," Grimfang said slowly, "has become problematic." "Fewer clients," Razorclaw added, apparently deciding that honesty was the path of least resistance. "Increased regulations, competition from automated solutions." "Ah," Jake nodded knowingly. "Technological displacement, classic industry disruption. Let me guess, some corporation developed drones or AI systems that can do parts of your job cheaper and faster, so now everyone thinks they don't need specialists anymore." "Something like that," Nightstrike admitted. "But the automated systems don't understand the nuances," Jake continued, warming to the topic. "They can't read environmental cues, can't adapt to unexpected situations, can't make the kind of judgment calls that come from years of experience." "Exactly," Bloodmaw exclaimed, then looked surprised at his own enthusiasm. "The automated hunting protocols are completely inadequate for complex scenarios. No understanding of prey psychology, no ability to adapt tactics in real time." "Prey psychology is crucial," Jake agreed seriously. "You can't just apply one-size-fits-all solutions to biological systems. Every situation is unique. Every individual responds differently to stress factors." Grimfang found himself nodding along. The corporate clients want guaranteed outcomes with minimal investment. They don't understand that effective population management requires extensive preparation, environmental analysis, psychological profiling. Psychological profiling? Jake leaned forward with genuine interest. That's fascinating. How do you assess individual behavioral patterns in a field environment? And suddenly, impossibly, the most feared hunting pack in 3-star systems found themselves having an animated professional discussion about the finer points of their craft with someone who was supposed to be their dinner. Stress indicators are key, Razorclaw explained, his coffee-fueled enthusiasm overriding years of operational security training. Body language, vocal patterns, movement choices. Most prey species follow predictable patterns when threatened, but there are always outliers. Like humans, Jake asked with what appeared to be academic curiosity. Humans are... Nightstrike paused, clearly struggling with how to explain this diplomatically. Humans are statistical anomalies. Your species' responses to threatening situations range from completely predictable to absolutely insane, often within the same individual. Fair point, Jake laughed. We're not exactly known for consistent decision-making under pressure. Although in this case, I have to admit, I wasn't really feeling threatened. You guys don't exactly fit the profile of dangerous wildlife. We don't? Bloodmaw asked, sounding almost hurt. Well, you're clearly predators, Jake said diplomatically. But you're also obviously intelligent, social, and professional. Dangerous wildlife doesn't usually engage in conversation or show concern about proper methodology. You're more like specialized contractors. Grimfang felt something shift in his chest. It took him a moment to recognize the sensation as relief. When was the last time someone had described their work as professional rather than monstrous? The truth is, Jake continued, apparently reading their expressions with disturbing accuracy, you guys are probably really good at what you do. The problem isn't your skills, it's that the industry has changed and nobody bothered to help you adapt. Adapt how? Nightstrike asked. Jake was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire with the expression of someone working through a complex problem. Well, what if instead of just population management, you expanded into ecosystem consulting, behavioral analysis, research support? Research support? Razorclaw's ears perked up. Think about it. You've got skills in tracking, observation, environmental analysis, stress response assessment. Those are exactly the capabilities that research expeditions need. But most scientists can't afford full security details and don't need military-grade protection. Jake gestured excitedly, warming to his theme. What they need are guides who understand animal behavior, can predict environmental hazards, and can keep research teams safe without interfering with the actual research. You guys would be perfect for that. You think, Grimfang said carefully, that there would be demand for such services? Are you kidding? The xenobiology research community is growing exponentially, but most of us are terrible at fieldwork. We're always looking for experienced guides who understand both the scientific process and practical safety considerations. He pulled out a battered tablet from his pack. Actually, I've got a conference coming up, the Galactic Xenobiology Symposium. Hundreds of researchers, all looking for support for upcoming expeditions. If you guys were interested... The pack exchanged glances that somehow managed to convey an entire conversation about professional possibilities, career transitions, and the radical concept of being valued for their expertise rather than feared for their lethality. This conference, Nightstrike said slowly, would it provide opportunities for networking? Absolutely. Plus, I bet you guys have insights about interspecies behavioral patterns that would blow people's minds. You could probably publish papers, give presentations, become recognized experts in your field. Recognized experts, not feared predators or hired killers, but recognized experts. Grimfang looked around at his pack. Razorclaw was practically vibrating with caffeine and excitement. Bloodmaw was methodically working through the bag of chips while clearly processing new possibilities. Nightstrike had that look she got when she was running complex tactical calculations. This conference, Grimfang said carefully. When and where would it be held? 3 weeks later, the rescue ship, Scientific Endeavor, dropped out of hyperspace above what their navigation charts cheerfully labeled as Uninhabited Wilderness Preserve. Warning, dangerous fauna. Captain Rodriguez had been expecting a routine pickup of one stranded xenobiologist. What she found instead was a scene that would require approximately 17 different incident reports and possibly a complete revision of first contact protocol. Dr. Jake Martinez was sitting around a campfire with 4 of the largest predators anyone in the rescue crew had ever seen outside of a nightmare. He was gesturing enthusiastically with what appeared to be a coffee cup while the predators took notes on primitive tablet devices. So, the key to proper data collection, Jake was saying as the rescue team cautiously approached, is establishing baseline behavioral patterns before introducing any experimental variables. You can't just jump straight into stress testing, you need context. But what if the subjects are naturally aggressive? Asked Razorclaw, who had apparently become the pack's designated note-taker. How do you establish baseline without contaminating the data through observer presence? Excellent question. That's where remote monitoring comes in. But you have to balance technological observation with direct sensory data. Your species' enhanced senses give you capabilities that most equipment can't match. Nightstrike looked up from her own notes. We've been thinking about that. Our olfactory analysis can detect stress hormones, dietary patterns, and health status at ranges that would be impossible with standard sensors. Exactly. That's publication-worthy research right there. Enhanced xenobiological assessment through multisensory predator analysis. Or something like that. Captain Rodriguez cleared her throat loudly. The entire group turned to look at her with the casual attention of colleagues interrupted during a working lunch. Dr. Martinez? She said carefully. Are you safe? Jake looked genuinely confused by the question. Safe? Yeah, of course. Why wouldn't I be safe? He gestured at the pack. These are my research partners. Grimfang, Razorclaw, Bloodmaw, and Nightstrike. They're going to be presenting at the Xenobiology Symposium next month. Presenting, Captain Rodriguez repeated slowly, at an academic conference. Their expertise in behavioral analysis is incredible, Jake continued enthusiastically. Grimfang has theories about interspecies stress response patterns that could revolutionize field research methodology. And Nightstrike's work on environmental threat assessment, she can predict dangerous weather patterns 3 hours before our best equipment picks up the first indicators. Bloodmaw, who was methodically working his way through what appeared to be Jake's entire supply of snack foods, looked up cheerfully. We're going to need to establish supply chains for human food products. This trail mix is essential for proper cognitive function during extended research operations. I've been telling them about Earth cuisine, Jake explained. They're fascinated by the concept of combining nutrition with flavor enhancement. Razorclaw wants to write a paper on the correlation between dietary satisfaction and research productivity. Razorclaw nodded enthusiastically, clearly running on approximately 14 cups of coffee. Human food preparation techniques demonstrate sophisticated understanding of neurochemical reward systems. It's brilliant, really, using pleasure responses to maintain optimal performance levels during extended intellectual tasks. Captain Rodriguez looked around the campsite, taking in the scattered research notes, the improvised food preparation area, and what appeared to be a detailed chart mapping out conference presentation schedules. How, exactly, she asked weakly, did this happen? Oh, it's a great story, Jake said. I crashed, they thought I was some kind of invasive species that needed population management. We had lunch, turns out we have a lot in common professionally, and now we're business partners. Grimfang's pack has agreed to provide research support and safety consulting for my upcoming expeditions. We're calling it Apex Research Solutions, Grimfang added, with what might have been pride. Professional field support for xenobiological research teams. Our preliminary business plan projects significant demand for experienced guides who understand both scientific methodology and predator behavior assessment, Nightstrike said, consulting her notes. The market analysis is quite promising. Plus, Bloodmaw added, Jake's going to teach us how to make those sandwich things. Apparently there are hundreds of different combinations. It's going to revolutionize our approach to expedition nutrition. Captain Rodriguez stared at the group for a long moment. In her 15 years of rescue operations, she'd seen stranded researchers do a lot of strange things. She'd pulled people off planets where they'd been building monuments to local fauna, attempting to marry sentient plant life, or trying to establish primitive civilizations using nothing but emergency rations and determination. But she'd never seen anyone accidentally start a interspecies consulting business with apex predators over a shared lunch. The conference registration, Jake was saying, pulling out his repaired communicator, requires some documentation about species qualifications, but I think their field experience speaks for itself. Grimfang has over 20 years of practical ecosystem management, which is more than most academics can claim. We're particularly excited about the networking opportunities, Razorclaw said, vibrating slightly with caffeine and enthusiasm. Jake says there will be researchers from over 40 different systems looking for field support. And the food vendors, Bloodmaw added hopefully. Jake mentioned something called convention food that apparently includes items called hot dogs and pizza. We're conducting a systematic analysis of human recreational cuisine. Nightstrike looked up from her calculations. Based on our preliminary market research, we project that Apex Research Solutions could achieve sustainable profitability within 2 fiscal quarters, assuming reasonable client acquisition rates and overhead management. They're naturals at business planning, Jake said proudly. Turns out that hunting requires a lot of the same skills as project management. Risk assessment, resource allocation, timeline coordination, client relationship management. Client relationship management? Captain Rodriguez asked, despite herself. Well, they used to have clients who hired them for specialized services, Jake explained diplomatically. But the market has shifted toward more sustainable approaches. Now they're transitioning their skill set into research support and educational consulting. Educational consulting? I'm going to help them develop a curriculum for practical predator studies, Jake said excitedly. Most xenobiology programs teach predator behavior from a theoretical perspective, but these guys have practical field experience that you can't get from textbooks. Grimfang cleared his throat. We should mention the publishing opportunities. Jake believes our field observations could contribute to multiple peer-reviewed papers. Starting with olfactory-based threat assessment in multi-species environments, Razorclaw added. The preliminary data is fascinating. And nutritional optimization for extended research operations, Bloodmaw said, holding up a bag of chips. This is going to change everything. Captain Rodriguez realized that she was witnessing something that would probably require a complete revision of the Starfleet manual for unusual first contact scenarios. Dr. Martinez, she said slowly, are you requesting transport for all of you? If that's okay, Jake said. They need to get to the conference, and I promise to help them set up their presentation materials. Plus, Grimfang wants to practice his public speaking, and Nightstrike needs access to a proper research database for her background citations. Public speaking practice? Academic presentations require different communication skills than field operations, Grimfang explained seriously. Jake is helping us adapt our briefing techniques for civilian academic audiences. The key, Nightstrike added, is to emphasize methodology and results rather than operational details. Right, Jake nodded. Focus on the research applications rather than the traditional applications. Same skills, different context. Captain Rodriguez looked at her rescue team, who were all staring at the scene with expressions ranging from bewilderment to fascination. Her communications officer was discreetly recording everything, probably for the inevitable inquiry board. Well, she said finally, I suppose we have room for additional passengers. Though, I should warn you, ship's food isn't going to be as innovative as what you've been having here. That's okay, Bloodmaw said cheerfully. Jake packed extra supplies for the trip. We're going to conduct comparative analysis of different human food preservation techniques during the voyage. Plus, Razorclaw added, Jake promised to teach us about something called cooking shows. Apparently humans have entire entertainment programs dedicated to food preparation techniques. It's research, Nightstrike said seriously. Understanding human cultural approaches to nutrition will help us better support research teams with diverse dietary requirements. As the rescue team began helping pack up the campsite, Captain Rodriguez found herself watching the strangest professional partnership she'd ever encountered. Jake was explaining conference presentation software to a group of apex predators who were taking notes with the dedication of graduate students. The predators were sharing field observation techniques with a xenobiologist who was treating their expertise like the valuable professional knowledge it apparently was. You know, she said to her first officer, I have a feeling this is going to be a very interesting voyage. Behind them, Grimfang was practicing his conference introduction. Hello, my name is Grimfang, and I'm a senior field specialist with Apex Research Solutions. Today, I'll be presenting our findings on practical applications of enhanced sensory analysis in xenobiological field research. Jake applauded enthusiastically. Perfect, but maybe try smiling when you introduce yourself. Academic audiences respond well to approachable presentation styles. Smiling, Grimfang repeated, apparently filing this under advanced human social protocols. Don't worry, Jake said. By the time we get to the conference, you guys are going to be the most popular research consultants in 3-star systems. And based on what Captain Rodriguez had witnessed, she was beginning to think he might actually be right.